Hello and welcome to ACS's Industry Insights. I'm Andrew Johnson, CEO of ACS, and Industry Insights is a series of features of ICT's most respected leaders, exploring innovation challenges and opportunities in the constantly evolving tech world. These interviews have been designed to allow you, ACS members and our viewers, to submit your questions and have them answered directly by our experts. Please send your questions through at any time on Twitter, Facebook Live or YouTube using the hashtag ACS Live symbol. Our ninth industry leader is Simon Moorfield, Executive General Manager, Information Systems and Technology at AGL. Simon, thanks for joining us.
Hi Andrew, great to be here.
Just to begin with, Simon, just take us a bit through your history. You've climbed the ranks through NAB, GE and CBA, and now you're an Executive GM at AGL. Can you share with us a little bit about your background and what do you attribute your successes to?
Sure, thank you. So I was a computer science graduate, started off as a programmer at NAB, but I very quickly learned that I more enjoyed problem solving than programming, and utilising those skills that I developed as a programmer to help solve business problems. So I found ways to navigate, I guess, through the organisation to use those skills, eventually becoming a project manager and broadly managing lots of projects, and then eventually being given the opportunity to be a CIO in some of the smaller organisations and ultimately larger organisations. I guess attributing success is I sort of found an area where I was passionate about within the technology realm. B, I think just being a decent, trusting, respectful individual I think is always helpful as you develop your career. Having no hidden agendas I think is very important. Yeah, I think the other thing was that special moments in my career, there were really difficult problems to solve, and I can remember moments where I put my hand up with my boss and said, look, I want to take that on. And I think your leader is always looking for people in their teams who can solve the difficult problems, and if you're the one who puts your hand up and helps them do that, I think they like to bring you along with them and give you further opportunity. So yeah, I guess some of the things that I would attribute to success, I guess, and probably just good luck. I think it's probably helpful.
Fantastic, thank you. Well, they're four big corporates and have really big tech teams. I'm sure you've seen the landscape evolve a lot during that period of your career, and in particular the convergence between business and the tech teams themselves. So one of the challenges we often hear from our members is how do you balance good tech outcomes with business outcomes? So managing that innovation and the leadership aspects to achieve the business expectations.
Well, I'm probably a little bit controversial and say there are no tech outcomes. It's probably all business outcomes. Most importantly, we're solving business problems, and the technology is going to enable the use or problem solving of those business problems. Balancing that, I think being very transparent around how technology can help your business solve that problem is very important, and get a shared empathy and understanding on how the technology can solve the business problem. And I think that ultimately that's what's driven a lot of the advancement in the agile methodology for delivering programs or change, is because that helps create a shared understanding and empathy. So I think that's super important, having aligned shared goals to how you deliver and solve a problem, deliver for and solve a problem.
Great. Yeah. Shortly after joining AGL, you led a major program to transform the company. One of the key changes was called Signature Moments. For our viewers, can you elaborate on what that means?
Yes, so Signature Moments were sort of moments of truth or special moments, a limited opportunity that you have with a customer. They may interact with you 3 or 4 critical times throughout the journey, and you want to make sure that those times are the times where you build trust, advocacy for the product and service that you're offering. And so we called those signature moments. So we had a couple of those, and one example would be where customers receive an energy bill, and unfortunately we have in our environment or in our industry a situation where we have estimated reads, and sometimes that leads to bill shock and other situations. So what we felt a signature moment for us would be around enabling customers to read their own bill through their phone, enter their meter read, and then allow them to pay as and when they essentially need within that billing cycle. So it completely removes the bill shock situation, and that's something unique. It was the first thing any of the major energy retailers were doing. So it was a great advancement, and that for us was an example of a signature moment.
Fantastic. Just so we can put that into context, how many signature moments might you have in any 12-month program of works?
Yeah, sure. So we can't have hundreds of them, or they're no longer signature moments. They just be regular moments, I guess. So we have 5 that we've rolled out. There's something around our joining AGL as a customer, or moving your house. Those kind of activities, very critical moments as a customer when you interact with AGL.
Fantastic. ACS is about to release our 4th edition of Australia's Digital Pulse tomorrow. It's been very well received by both our members, government and the business community. Last year, one of the key findings were that service companies were looking more and more like tech companies, and one of the key drivers were cross-functional teams and having cross-collaboration across business units. How important are those collaboration systems in AGL and the broader tech landscape?
Yeah, it's something I've been thinking about quite a lot and discussing with my teams, and I've got this view that many companies today that we think are technology companies are actually just service companies of the future. If you think about the way that you might rent a car, or move around, or get a house, or go shopping, or get a job, or buy products online, you think of the companies that do that for you today. They might be, the sports bets, realestate.com, Seek.com, Uber, Airbnb. We consider those in some cases, technology companies. Essentially, they're just service companies of the future. And organisations like ours are moving heavily towards the way that they operate. But if you're a bricks and mortar company today, that's sort of a brand, I guess. If you're a bricks and mortar company today, and you don't start to act and think like those technology companies, which are essentially service companies, in 5-10 years' time, you're going to be irrelevant. So you've really got to start to think how service companies in the future are going to be operating, largely around technology services, I believe.
Fantastic. So you've mentioned a number of big brands that are considered digital leaders, but there's still a general feeling across the community that a number of businesses aren't transforming fast enough. How can you take old structures and make them more agile so that they can be successful in the future? So 5 years is not a big time frame.
Yeah, how can you take old structures? Well, first of all, you've got to take the leap of faith to accept that you need to change. So any change program, one of the first steps that you need to take is that shared understanding that change needs to take place. And so if a company doesn't recognise that they need to change not only the way that they go to market and provide the service, but also the way they develop those services and models, then it's going to be very difficult, obviously. So once you've made that huge step, which a lot of people don't necessarily make, then you need to then you need to focus on how you're going to deliver that change. There are many, I guess, proven practices and paths in adopting methodologies such as Agile, importantly design thinking as a method, and AGL, we developed a framework that largely used design thinking as a design method of human-centered design elements, as well as incorporating Agile planning practices to really develop any initiative that we have through that, I guess, development and design methodology. And I think companies then, other organisations would then need to adopt a similar set of practices. But I think there are proven practices around design and Agile that companies can adopt. It's not difficult to do so. You just got to accept that you need to change first.
Excellent. So that being the key point, determining that you do need to change, do you have any tips on the sorts of test cases that you would run so a business unit could determine their future, whether it was evolution or revolution? What sort of tests can you run to help people and business units get to that stage of understanding they must change now? Yeah, look, I may probably tell a little bit of a story as an example as to how I'd think about it. It's not AGL necessarily, it could be any organisation. One example that I heard of is that startup organisations in Silicon Valley, and it's not just limited to them, obviously it's anywhere, they would test a product line or a service, and they'd create a dummy website, and they'd call it, I'm selling shampoo, Simon Shampoo. And they'd test that against something else. It might be another dummy website that would say Simon's hair products. And whichever one of those had the most amount of traffic, they'd then develop a set of products and services around them. And so the point being, importantly, they developed their test criteria and their hypotheses first before developing the products and services.
And so I think if you are going on this change program, it's very important to create your test case or your hypotheses and a means to test it for you to then go out and change the way that you do things. Because then you can always come back to learn through the data that you've collected what you're doing well and what you're not doing well. So I'd say, yeah, developing your test case first.
Fantastic, that's some great insights. We're going to throw to a short break now so we can start to gear up some of our audience questions. When we return, we'll take a look at those and we'll ask Simon some questions directly from our audience. Don't forget to submit your questions through Twitter, Facebook, YouTube and Periscope using the hashtag ACS Live.
Our next generation superheroes will be those embracing technology by being brave and being bold. They'll be solving cybercrime, homelessness and Alzheimer's, assuring our national security, our energy supply and saving lives. Superheroes will be the thinkers, the dreamers, the visionaries and the revolutionaries. Our vision is for Australia to be a world leader in technology talent, one where every child can change the world.
Welcome back to ACS Industry Insights. My guest today is Simon Moorfield, Executive GM Information Systems and Technology at AGL. It's now time to take some of your questions. First question, what has been the biggest project and achievement at AGL in the last few years for your consumers?
The largest program has been our customer experience transformation. We originally called it our digital transformation, but we felt it was too technology focused. It was meant to be all about the customer, and hence why we called it our customer experience transformation. We've done some incredible things on our website. We now, through our mobile app, in the last 12 months, we take in twice as many interactions than what we had 12 months ago. We're taking over, I think it's 3.5 million interactions now, regularly through our mobile and web services, which is a great shift. And what that does is enables customers to do the things with AGL that they want to, when they want to, and largely through how they want to, because we've designed it by engaging the customers in the design process. So I think that's a significant shift in the way that we've thought about our customer base and the value that we're creating to our customers. Yeah.
Fantastic. Hugh from Facebook, how do you bring business owners along at the same pace as the technology team to achieve quality outcomes?
Well, I'm not sure. I think it's very individual. It's very, some people are moving faster than others, whether it's an IT person or a business person or both. We're all business people ultimately. But I think the trusted relationships is the most important thing. And I guess a shared understanding of what you're collectively trying to solve or drive or produce together, I think is what creates success and working relationships, whether the term business and IT. Actually, I prefer not to call it. We're all business people, as I said earlier. So I think, an important trust and transparency. What I find some teams have done in the past is, this is a very, I guess, an IT thing, but creating a project and a cost structure around that. They don't necessarily share the details as to why things cost the amounts that they do. And if you walk teams through that, I think people do get a shared understanding of the challenges that you're facing to help solve their problems. As long as you're completely transparent around that, I think it builds trust, and therefore you work together to get a better outcome.
Fantastic, thank you. We have a question from Saidul from YouTube. If developing the test case is the first step, what should be the second and third steps?
Measure. And there's a saying that we have in the development circles at the moment. It's pursue, pivot, or perish. And so that's the second step. So measure, and then based on that, you decide, is this going well? I'm going to pursue it. If it's not going well, try to understand why, then pivot. If it's really not going well and you're not able to pivot, doesn't make sense, just shut it down and perish. Yeah, so I think ensuring that you've got a test case, you've got a way to figure out, interpret the data, and then decide what to do.
Fantastic. What about your observations of the broader landscape across Australia? We hear a lot about the fourth industrial revolution. The nature of jobs are changing, so people are key. How would you classify Australia's performance compared to others internationally, and where do you feel our competitive advantages may lay?
Yeah, it's something you hear a lot about when you're talking to other global technology companies, largely in a relationship to partner sale, etc. They like the Australian business environment because it's an advanced economy, it's quite contained, and they can also then test a lot of their products and services here. So I won't necessarily mention names, but I know that they see us as an early adopter of technology. And so by testing their new products and services and partnering with companies like ours and many other organisations in Australia, we get to see a lot of the early ideation that takes place in product and service and roll that out to our customer base. So I think we're very fortunate. Australia is a set of early adopters. We also are seen to embrace new technology, both from the technology teams but also consumer environments. So then to introduce that new technology seems to be quite frictionless, I guess. But a problem we have is that we have a little bit, when it's well known, a little bit of a brain drain where some of our people are leaving Australia and heading overseas for some great opportunities. And what we need to be able to do is present those great opportunities here and leverage those things. Like, you know, some of the world leading organisations are testing their products and services here. How do we create that sustaining opportunity for people to have great careers in Australia? So I think that's a bit of a challenge that we face from a technology standpoint.
Fantastic, thank you. SMEs, small to medium sized businesses, are still the engine room of the Australian economy. So we've got a big geography and SMEs everywhere. Possibly they've not been as fast in terms of adoption of digital tech as big end or Australians as consumers. Would you have any tips of how small to medium sized businesses can best leverage digital technologies?
Yeah, I think it's a tough one because, you know, if they're not leveraging technology today, it can be a perceived cost that they don't already have. And while I've never operated a small business, and nor should I profess to know exactly how they work, but I would say cost is a challenge on a daily basis. And for them to having to even contemplate bringing in a new IT cost for them, it would be a challenge. But there must be some, and maybe it's a gap in the industry, you know, maybe there's got to be some forum where they can seek advice and where they can then trial and experiment on a smaller scale. Because I do feel in many instances there is opportunity to leverage technology, whether it be simple mobile apps or new SaaS products that are out there. But how do they get awareness of that is the challenge. And so where there must be some sort of industry forum where small, medium enterprises potentially come to a technology-led software product forum where they can see and interact with people. I can sort of envision there must be some sort of place where that happens, but if there isn't, I think it's a very difficult problem for them to get comfortable with. Yeah.
Fantastic, thank you. If we go back into big corporates and big large tech teams like AGL has, what are the successful ways you see collaboration occurring within businesses so that the tech team is adding value and that the ideation process goes smoothly and the pivot or perish mentality that you mentioned earlier is enabled?
Look, I don't want to be, I'm not necessarily an agile zealot, but I think the agile methodology recently has really created means and ways to enable teams to work more closely together. And that's been tremendous for our industry, I think. You know, I was speaking to somebody in our P&C HR team today, and we're doing a transformation program on our corporate tools, so our HR, our finance, our procurement, but also our asset management SAP platforms. And one of the P&C people in the project actually said to me, "I love the way we're working at the moment. You know, I wish we could, even my team is saying, can we just continue operating this way after the project is finished?" And I said, we can. You know, instead of working at a scale, you know, we have maybe 4 or 5 teams solving that particular problem. You're moving from a large scale, but to a continuous improvement mindset, leveraging DevOps techniques and agile techniques. You can working closely with your business, with your IT teams and your HR teams together. That could be the way to go forward. And they're like, okay, can we do that? And I think the agile and the DevOps mentality that has been created recently really unlocks that opportunity where our business teams or the rest of our teams in AGL want to continue working that way, which is fantastic. You know, you've got advocates for the way that we work. I mean, it's a great time at the moment. Yeah, it's good.
Excellent. Let's ask a sensitive one. but it's okay because we only have techies watching. Sometimes there's a digital divide between the business leaders and the tech team. How do you go about closing that digital divide? So when new tools, you start to have those ideation, picking a tool and then having it implemented, embedded. How do you go about reducing that digital divide?
I think I've probably touched on a little bit in the answer to the last question. I think the important thing is that everyone has great ideas and everyone can contribute to successful improvements in the way that you get products and services, and they're both technology people and non-technology people. As long as you've had the ability and the means to create that trusted environment or an ideation process that enables that, that will certainly unlock those opportunities that you're referring to. I'm very strong on working together, and I think as I sort of touched on my career, I guess one of the success criteria that I reflect upon has been being a trusted, respectful person. I've tried to encourage that within my organisation as well, or within our organisation. And I think if you do that through those methodologies, there is no divide. You'll walk into, that was interesting, another success criteria we talked about with the transformation we're about to kick off, in another business unit of ours. When you get into that particular part of the office, if you're not able to distinguish who's an IT person and who's not, that's one of the success criteria that we're going to have. And I think that's great. We are solving business problems along with the other business teams, so it's terrific.
Fantastic. We touched on a little bit earlier the brain drain and how real that is. AGL has been a fantastic promoter advocate around diversity. Could you share with us how culture is important for empowering, enabling diversity of thinking within any organisation, but particularly in tech where there's underrepresentation in a variety of different demographics?
Yeah, exactly. I think what you're looking for in diversity is varied experiences, and so when people contribute, they're contributing from their personal experience. And so can you imagine the counterfactual if you didn't have diversity in your team? So you might have a demographic of, let's just say, a single sex, a single age group, they grew up in a single suburb, there's 8 of them, all within the same age group, and you said, please solve this particular problem. The alternate to that is you have people from all over the world, variety of age groups, variety of genders, variety of experiences, and ask them to solve the same problem. Most likely, I think everyone would, with consensus, would believe that that diverse group of experiences would get you a better outcome. That's why we fundamentally, it sounds so obvious, fundamentally believe that with a more diverse team that you have, you're going to get a better outcome. And at AGL, we're very strong on the promotion of a variety of diversity themes. It's one of our key values, which is inclusive of all. And we believe that the changes that we've adopted recently in our practice of attracting diverse talent into our organisation is absolutely having an impact. So it's good.
Fantastic. So we've looked at the team within AGL, but diversity and inclusiveness also goes to your customer base, and we've seen a lot of organisations moving away from that sort of mass marketing to personalised retailing. Could you share some of your insights on how do you go about targeting specific demographics to provide that personalised customer experience?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things that we've done as part of our customer experience transformation is invest heavily in data and analytics. And we're going to be seeing the fruit of that, I think, very shortly. One of the use cases one of our team gave me recently was through the work that they've been doing in introducing this new platform that we've developed, they as a customer tested their own customer data. And the fascinating thing that came out of that was their energy bill, they noticed that it started to increase, and it started to increase quite rapidly. And we were able to detect through our analytics platform that potentially they had a faulty appliance. It turned out that the person had a faulty hot water generator at home, hot water device. And so for our customers, you think about that, we're able to then identify for them, potentially, some of your devices are no longer working to spec. You potentially want to look at it to save energy. And so we're looking at these ways to not only allow customers to preventatively increase their energy prices, but through analytics we're also providing energy insights. And so we're able to help customers identify how much money they're spending on comfort, let's say, how much they're spending on cooking, how much they're spending on maybe pool pumps or particular services, to again educate and help customers to reduce their energy spend or use energy spend the way that they want to. Again, very targeted, but this is by customer that we're able to do this now, which is fascinating. It's great for our customers, I believe.
Fantastic. So we've spent a lot of time already on the ideation process and pivoting and the like. What about once the product is at an area where you want to take it to market and scale, personalisation, does that impact the ability to scale, or how do you go about maximising returns from the investments that you've made?
No, I don't think personalisation impacts. You've got to set the underlying platform and capability up the right way. This particular product, we've chosen to put it in one of our infrastructure as a service providers. We've got a great relationship there, and so it's ultimately scalable. It's how you manage the, I guess, the design and the cost setup of how you do that. But importantly, it comes back to the point I also mentioned around the idea of testing ideas first, testing them with customers, ensuring that they're resonating, and then developing a strategy around measurement, and then ultimately what to do. Because if you don't set it up that way initially, you won't know what to scale and when to scale it. You won't have the data collection capability to say this is really taking off. Make sure that the back end is ready and set up to take on that scale, because you haven't tested it, you haven't created test cases. And so I think as you get into the personalisation space, really identify the test cases, what to scale, what not to scale, and set up, ensure that your architecture is set up to handle that. Yeah.
Excellent. And how much of the data analytics is automated or automatable? You know, we hear a lot about artificial intelligence and machine learning. Is that something that companies build, or do you buy in that capacity?
Yeah, it's a mix, depending on the problem you're solving, right? In this particular case, an industry term for this might be customer next best action. There are products in the marketplace that enable you to do that. And so we've chosen to buy a product in that space, and we've built, within that product, you set the rules essentially, and those rules will automatically take action based on data and choices that you've set up, I guess. However, if you want to get into the more machine learning AI space, that's far more nuanced. You've got to spend more time developing and having the machine learning algorithms understand the patterns, understand the data over a significant period of time, for them to then potentially automatically take action as well. But those algorithms will learn and self-learn and enable you to take action, which is a little bit different to the analytics and next best action technology that we're using there. They're more rule-based that you've created, as opposed to automated learning.
Fantastic. We're going to go to another short break now, just while we get our viewer questions ready. And when we look to return, it'll be your turn to ask Simon some questions. It's not too late. Segment's still got time for some more questions, so please use Twitter, Facebook, YouTube and Periscope using the hashtag ACS Live. Thank you.
Our next generation superheroes will be those embracing technology by being brave and being bold. They'll be solving cybercrime, homelessness and Alzheimer's, assuring our national security, our energy supply and saving lives. Superheroes will be the thinkers, the dreamers, the visionaries and the revolutionaries. Our vision is for Australia to be a world leader in technology talent, one where every child can change the world.
Welcome back, and thanks for sending your questions through. We'll ask a few of them now. Ravinda from YouTube. Countries are considering artificial intelligence for developing test cases in the future. How will agile career options be shaped in the future?
Agile query options, I guess. I'm not sure how to respond to Ravindra's question, but we're experimenting at the moment with machine learning capability, specifically on predictive analytics in our generation, AGL's generation of energy. And so the way that I understand that the machine learning capability is going to be developed is that we identify There's a number of different tools that you can use, but you essentially develop the patterns over a period of time, and through those patterns, your machine learning tools that you're harnessing are then going to develop what the most logical or the highest probability outcome needs to be. And it doesn't need to be 100% with machine learning. You just know that that answer is the right answer, and then you can take an action off the back of that.
Mohindin from YouTube. Educating our next generation is of critical importance for the future of our economy. What are your views on teaching kids in the classroom emerging technologies such as blockchain?
I think it's critical, absolutely. And I think YouTube is a fascinating way to educate children on emerging technologies. And if I might say, and my daughter had a STEM assignment yesterday, and she actually learnt how to build the science experiment off YouTube. And it went wonderfully well, which is great. But I do feel that you can, it is incredibly important that we do teach children both coding and other science and technology, because that is ultimately the future. If you look at the number of jobs that have been created since the time I started in IT, and the number of jobs that are in and around the IT industry today, I can't imagine whether it's 10-fold, 100-fold or the like. It's enormous, and it's only going to get bigger. And so if we're not teaching and equipping the Australian children that are going to be the adults of tomorrow with those basic skills, I am sure many other countries, if not every other country, is going to be doing that, and we're going to be left behind. So we absolutely have to teach our children now the value of science and technology. Now, whether they are themselves programmers or they step into other areas like I did, but in and around that domain is critical. So give them the opportunity to see how they can unlock their capability in and around science and technology.
Fantastic. You mentioned pivot a couple of times, and I'm trying to combine pivot with culture. So some would say Australians are fairly conservative, and it's sometimes hard to make a pivot, and maybe happens a little bit later than people need to. Are there examples out there that you've seen that you'd say that was a good example of a pivot that might inspire others?
I guess two things I might say on that. I guess a pivot recognises that you're willing to learn. Right? If you're stubborn and you just stick to your own idea and you're not using it on fact-based choices, then it's probably a road to failure, a path to failure. So pivot, I think, first of all, you have to accept that you're probably not doing it well. And we've all heard these comments around fail fast and whatnot. So I think that's the important step, one important step. A, accepting that you've probably failed, but most importantly, you've learnt. A great example of how I've seen some of those cases is that through our customer experience transformation, we thought of an idea, or somebody thought of an idea, that we might video an experience or a bill or something of that nature. And it was going to be one of our signature moments. But what we learnt is that we tested it with customers, and you know what, it's not resonating. So even though it was someone's great idea and had gone through a number of elements of testing, once we got it to customers, we pivoted, we cancelled that. And we went on and did something else that we felt customers more valued. Another pivot strategy that I've seen work quite well is this shift from large-scale manufacturing and producing engineering products to collecting data off those engineering products and then creating services. A classic example of that is in airlines with the creation or aircraft engine manufacturing. You know, Rolls-Royce or GE spend a significant amount of time in selling services opposed to selling the engine. And the reason being, they can learn how to, through their data collection process, and they've pivoted from selling that, I guess is the story, pivoted through the data collection, improve their engine, but also improve the value to their customer, and do that over a sustained period of time. That's a pivoting strategy completely. And so they've got a sustaining business model on services. So I guess a couple of examples there, hopefully they resonate. Yeah.
Fantastic. I just want to explore the area of data. It's an area that ACS is very passionate about. We have a data sharing task force that's been producing technical white papers on how governments can make more data sources open. Flip side is we've seen mandatory breach notification legislation come in Australia. We've seen the Facebook's examples of how they've been using data and selling data, and there's that element of trust as being a bit of a challenging environment. In your opinion, what are the big opportunities around data, and how do we create an environment where we can balance that risk and reward?
Yeah, I think one of the things you leap to is personalisation, and you can get that through data collection. But I think there's a bit of there's a plus and minus to that, I can say, if you don't get it right. Yeah, I touched on what we're trying to do. I think Netflix is an interesting example. You know, I think they've been famous for their personalisation. But I also, in some ways, I find it a little bit frustrating because they've personalised me or boxed me to action movies, and I don't have the opportunity to find other movies if I'm interested in it. But I think that best value for data is unlocking the consumer side of data versus the manufacturing side of data, and they're essentially creating platform businesses. I think that's the unique thing that has been created here, and with data analytics. And what I mean is you're able to make use of environments or services that have capacity. A great example is Uber. Yeah, lots of cars that are unused, with a set of people who need to or want to make money or through driving and find those an interest. So they've created through data and analytics the opportunity to unlock a vehicle's waste of time sitting there and someone's own personal waste in sitting waiting for a job. Through data analytics, they've combined the two. And there's many, many opportunities. That's the obvious one that everyone talks about. But I think going forward, that's the great use of data that we'll see, combining not only different industry uses, drivers versus consumers and travel, but creating that shared economy through the use of data is what we'll see more and more and more use of. And hopefully organisations like ours will see where we can unlock that and harness that opportunity as well.
Fantastic, thank you. I imagine in your role you've got a potential partner knocking on your door every other day with the latest and greatest. In terms of how do you make the distinction between what's truly disruptive tech and from ones that are just hype?
Yeah, it's a simple question really. Yeah, there's no real disruptive tech, there's just things that customers want, right? And if your technology is something that dramatically reduces the cost of service, reduces their time, those are the ones that ultimately win. You know, I read once that the iPad equivalent, I think it might have been created by Microsoft, I'm not quite sure, but it was done 10 years earlier. But there was no real use case for this. It wasn't, the technology was there. It was always available. It had been available for 10 years. But until the iTunes platform was created, the ability to download apps and the use around that, that's when the device became really useful. So, it's not necessarily the technology that's going to unlock the value of the device, really. It's going to be how you can create a use case that dramatically changes the cost structure, dramatically creates a better ease of use or reduces the time for somebody to do something. And so identifying those is super hard, but that's what you're constantly trying to experiment with your methods around design thinking and learning techniques that you're creating and developing within organisations. It's hopefully to identify those opportunities, and then you get technology to solve that problem, as opposed to technology creating a certain device or program or something like that.
Excellent. A question for our younger members. We'd have 5,000 studying at university, roughly speaking, and AGL is a big employer of tech workers. Where do you see the big tech jobs in demand that would afford the higher paying salaries in the sort of next 5 years? Where should students be targeting their career aspirations?
Well, I think there's going to continue to be a lot of work in front-end development. I think in user experience, as and when we continue to shift more and more services and even engage with more products and services through front-end engagement, there's a lot of front-end development skills that are going to be required, even integration skills with some of those services that exist. But also, I think data and analytics and the development of platform-type environments is a skill that I think is going to rapidly increase. We're moving now from, I'd say in the last 5 to 10 years, where a lot of our data and analytics were essentially producing reports and insights, now to next best action, soon to be machine learning. So you're going to start to move from a single way of, or a single team that sort of evolving in scale to, I think there's going to be 3 or 4 or 5 threads of this data and analytics and machine learning capability, and there's going to be a lot more jobs in that space, I think. And it's a very interesting space, I think, for people who are not necessarily computer programmers, but also mathematicians who have an interest in solving analytical problems. I think that domain is also going to be very important. So I think there's going to be a lot of jobs in that space.
Fantastic. And one last one, if I may. With automation converging traditional occupations, when you have a new project come up, you look across your team, is there ever a time when you say, oh, like a bit of that role and a bit of this role? What would be a perfect new tech role that Simon would create? Does one sort of pop out, a combination of different skills together packaged in a new occupation?
You know, there's I thought of a role about 5 years ago. It didn't quite take off. But it was one where it was, we're creating a lot of in our organisations. It was back when I was working at AGL. In our organisations, we tend to build and integrate software. And I sort of thought, well, why? Why can't we just go to the App Store and someone just spend time looking at all the varying apps that are out there and say, rather than build it, just consume that app. But now with software as a service as well, I actually think there could be this role where we get people scanning products and services, and rather than us trying to build it and trying to integrate it, why can't we consume more of the software as a service products that are out there and adopt them? You know, we tend to think that we want to build everything. We don't necessarily need to. There's lots of software out there. So who's spending their time looking at all the software that's out there and just reusing it? That would save us a lot of time, a lot of money. Don't know if we'll get it. Maybe it's the chief product hunter or something like that. I don't know. But I think that'd be a combined role somewhere between architecture, design. I don't know.
Fantastic. Well, folks, you heard it here first. Chief Product
Hunter.
That sounds fantastic. That's all we have time for this afternoon. I'd just like to say thank you to Simon for his very generous time and insight into the tech landscape as he sees it. I'd also like to thank you for joining us tonight and sending your questions through on our social channels. If we didn't get to your questions, we're sorry, and we'll pose those to Simon and aim to get those back to you in the next week. I'm Andrew Johnson. I'll see you again soon for the next episode of ACS's Industry Insights.